One of the strongest places people expect things to fall apart after the center loosens is in relationships. Work can still function, tasks can still get done, daily life can still move, but relationships feel different. They seem to require identity, effort, and maintenance. So a quiet concern appears. If there's no center anymore, how do relationships survive? This episode is about relationships, not as contracts, not as roles, and not as identities, but as living interactions that continue even when no one is trying to hold them together. Most relationships are built around roles: parent and child, partner and partner, friend and friend, employee and employer. Roles help organize behavior. They create expectations. They establish boundaries. They provide continuity over time. But roles are not the same as relationship itself. They are overlays. When the center is present, roles tend to solidify. They become part of identity. I am this kind of partner. I am that kind of parent. This is my role in your life. Once roles become identity-based, relationships require maintenance. Effort must be applied to stay consistent. Behavior must be monitored to match the role. This creates tension. When the center loosens, roles often begin to soften. Not because relationships matter less, but because identity is no longer organizing them. This can feel unsettling at first. People worry that without clear roles, relationships will lose structure or meaning. But what actually happens is something different. Relationships begin to function more directly. Instead of responding from a role, response comes from contact. What is needed here? What is happening now? What is appropriate in this moment? These questions arise naturally. They do not require identity to answer. Without a center, relationships lose some of their predictability, but they gain flexibility. There is less pressure to behave in a consistent way across time. More space to respond to changing conditions. This does not weaken connection. It often strengthens it. One of the biggest shifts is the reduction of expectation. With a center, expectations are often unspoken. You should act this way. You should feel that way. You should always respond like this. These expectations are tied to roles. When they are unmet, disappointment appears. Resentment builds. Without a center, expectations lose their grip. Not because needs disappear, but because needs are addressed directly rather than symbolically. Instead of expecting someone to behave a certain way, communication becomes clearer. Requests become simpler. Boundaries become more honest. This does not mean relationships become passive. It means they become less performative. There is less pretending, less role-playing, more real-time interaction. This is especially noticeable in close relationships. Partners often worry that without identity, love will fade. But love does not originate from roles. It originates from presence and responsiveness. Without a center, affection still appears. Care still happens. What fades is the narrative about what love should look like. This allows relationships to breathe. There is room for distance without threat, room for closeness without possession, room for change without collapse. Conflict also changes. With a center, conflict feels personal. Disagreement threatens identity. So arguments become defensive. People fight to protect who they are rather than to address what's happening. Without a center, conflict becomes more situational. Disagreement still occurs, but it is less about winning, less about being right, more about resolving something specific. This does not eliminate emotion. It reduces escalation. Listening improves without effort, not because someone is trying to listen better, but because attention is no longer divided. There is less internal commentary, less planning of responses, more space to hear what is actually being said. Another important shift happens around attachment. With a center, attachment often includes fear. Fear of loss, fear of change, fear of abandonment. These fears are tied to identity continuity. Without a center, attachment softens. Care remains. Connection remains. But clinging reduces. This allows relationships to move more naturally. This does not mean relationships become disposable. It means they are not used to stabilize identity. They are no longer required to provide a sense of self. This removes pressure from both sides. Parenting offers a clear example. Parents often feel pressure to be a certain kind of parent, to maintain consistency, to live up to an internal standard. Without a center, parenting does not stop. Care does not disappear. What changes is rigidity. Responses become more adaptive, less rule-bound. more responsive to the actual child rather than to an idea of parenting. This often leads to more trust. Children sense when responses are real rather than role-driven. They feel less managed, more met. Friendships also change. Without roles, friendships become less transactional. There is less scorekeeping, less concern about who initiates, less pressure to maintain constant contact. Friendships ebb and flow naturally. Connection remains even when interaction pauses. Another concern people raise is loyalty. They worry that without a center, loyalty will fade. But loyalty does not come from obligation. It comes from care and history. Without a center, loyalty becomes less rigid, more contextual. This allows for honesty. It allows for boundaries. And paradoxically, it often makes loyalty more genuine. Relationships without roles also allow endings. This is important. With a center, endings feel like failure. They threaten identity. Without a center, endings are recognized as transitions. Sadness may arise, grief may appear, but there is less self-blame, less narrative about what it means. This allows relationships to end without being erased. A common misunderstanding at this stage is thinking that relationships require effort to survive. But relationships require responsiveness, not maintenance. When responsiveness is present, relationships adjust naturally. When it is absent, no amount of role-playing can save them. Another trap is trying to be role-less on purpose. People attempt to avoid labels, to resist structure, to stay undefined. This creates another identity, another role. Relationships do not need to be dismantled. They need to be unburdened. The simplest orientation is this. Let relationships respond to what is actually happening. Let roles soften without needing to remove them. Let connection form and reform without supervision. If relationships feel quieter now, that is not loss. If they feel less dramatic, that is not distance. It is the absence of unnecessary structure. Relationships do not require a center to function. They require contact. They require responsiveness. They require honesty, all of which remain fully intact. In the next episode, we'll look at time. Not time as something to manage, not time as pressure, but how time is experienced and used when there is no one inside trying to control it. Because this is another place where relief appears quietly and deeply.